Good afternoon. This is the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting. It has now commenced. It is March 6th at 4 p.m. This is a virtual meeting. We ask that you mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone and only use the chat function to request to speak. Also, to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio. Voting members are Maggie Amadeo-Tellez.
Present.
Mary Ann Bierling.
Present.
Mindy Bernstein.
Present.
Mark Clark has retired. His replacement is Alan Sullis.
And I'm here.
Vicky Cucino. Not present. Serena Audeke.
Present.
Lori Mazurbo.
Present. Miserbo. Yes, thank you.
I'm present, Tisha Tallman. I'm vice chair in for Jay Young, who is the chair, who is not present. Jim Toffel is not present. Ray Winch.
Present.
Ex officio members, Ann Schnetka. Corin Manning.
Present.
Marcos Ismael.
Present.
Michael Edmonds.
I am present.
Very good. Kenny Wong.
Present.
Very good. So now we'll make the call to the audience. Call to the audience is limited to 3 minutes per speaker and a total of 10 minutes in total. Yes?
I just wanted to jump in and clarify. Welcome to Alan. He's filling in for Wendy Asher's replacement. Mark Clark did retire, and so we'll be reaching out to the new executive director for PCOA, who I believe just started. But welcome, Alan. And also just an opportunity for Alan to introduce himself to everyone here. If you wanted to take a minute to do that.
Okay, I can do that. So my name is Alan Solot. I'm a lawyer with Southern Arizona Legal Aid. Wendy Asher has left legal aid and moved on to the Attorney General's office. So she suggested that I take this role on, and I've been accepted in it. And so I'm a native Tucsonan. I've been in Tucson my whole life. I've been a lawyer since 1980. I've been with Southern Arizona Legal Aid since July of 22. And my primary practice area now is doing eviction defense, so involving eviction lawsuits mostly filed in justice court.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Allison. So now it's a call to the audience. It's limited to 3 minutes per speaker for a total of 10 minutes. All speakers must share their name to be recorded in the meeting minutes. And please remember that the commission members may only respond to criticism, and requests of items that are currently not on the agenda will be placed on a future agenda. Are there any members of the audience who would like to speak?
No hands are up.
Okay, thank you, Neto. With no hands being up, we'll move on to the next agenda item, the Housing Trust Fund presentation. Allison, is Ann going to be doing that presentation? Oh, there you are, Ann.
Yes,
Thank you.
Hello.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, all. I'm happy to do the presentation. Remind me how long I have. I have not seen the updated agenda.
20-ish minutes for the Housing Trust Fund, and then 10 for the federal funding.
Okay. Okay, I am going to share my screen. I do believe you got this presentation already. And so that doesn't look right. Hold on. Share.
And for commissioner members, we will go ahead and post it to the website following this meeting. I believe there was only one presentation that's been placed up on the website. We'll make sure that that gets up for commissioners and any participants who'd like to review the presentation.
Can you see that presentation? It's
Yes.
giving me a weird, okay. Thank you, commissioners. So I mentioned briefly at the last meeting, Mayor and Council recently approved reactivation of the Tucson Housing Trust Fund, and in it, there is a role for the commission as it was, and I'll sort of walk through, give the presentation. This is the same presentation I gave to Mayor and Council. And then we can sort of talk through what next steps would look like there. So big picture, and I know that these are conversations we've had with you all, both the Affordable Housing Subcommittee I know has had this conversation, and there have been some other conversations, but just essentially housing trust funds are established sources of funding created by governments that really support local priorities when it comes to housing. So typically they support construction, acquisition, of preservation of affordable housing, but also the goal here is this is local funding that can support local priorities. So you'll sort of see how it was used before, which isn't necessarily just focused on those items. They are often, and I will give a little bit of commentary here, they are often funded through dedicated revenue sources, and really for the sustainability of the fund, I would say that's ideal to have a dedicated revenue source, and sort of you'll see why I say that. But last, the National Institute of Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Association keeps tabs on how many housing trust funds there are, and there's quite a bit across the country. They can be at the city level, they can be at the county level. Our state has a housing trust fund. And of course, there's one at the national level as well. So in 2006, the Tucson Mayor Council created a housing trust fund. And so it's been sort of a fun exercise to recreate a lot of materials from back in the day. But from what we found, there was several funding sources that were identified to support the Housing Trust Fund, including sale of city-owned properties. There was an idea of a fee on conversion of rental properties, unexpected funds from the utility service. We have some low-income assistance programs, so the thinking was what doesn't get used could go to the trust fund. And then monies, it was identified that monies could come from mayor and council when it was available. And so I did learn that when Carol West retired, they had asked for donations at her retirement party, and that went to the Housing Trust Fund. Ray, I appreciate people just jumping in, so feel free.
It's a question about the utility service low-income assistance. Would that be just Tucson Water, since that's our only public utility, or would that be other utilities as well?
So it would be Tucson Water in that case. And this was, my understanding is that never ended up being part of what was collected.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I will say, because I was jumping from another meeting, I do know that Marianne Bierling, feel free to jump in. My understanding is you were on the original task force, so you may have some context here that don't hesitate to jump in, please. So I did find this chart that really outlined how a lot of the funding that was collected for the Housing Trust Fund was spent. And so to summarize, the majority of it went to down payment assistance for low-income homeowners. There was also some funding that supported employer-assisted housing. There was some that went towards rental rehabilitation, a little bit that went to homeowner repair, and then there was a bucket for security deposits for the VA for VASH vouchers. And so In 2006, when mayor and council established the Housing Trust Fund, they also established a new committee that was specifically created to oversee the Housing Trust Fund. And so that was created in 2006, from my understanding, and again, feel free to jump in. I think Marcos, you were around during some of this time too. My understanding is kind of 2006, 2007, things were pretty active. They met quite a lot. And then, of course, we know that 2008 with the recession, really the city ended up prioritizing just trying to balance a budget rather than doing a lot of activities for the Housing Trust Fund. So I think at that time, 2008, 2009, the trust fund didn't meet that often. And so in 2011, as the Citizens Advisory Committee was up for renewal, they sunsetted the Oversight Commission. And at the time, the city's housing commission was called the Metropolitan Housing Commission. They gave the duties of oversight of the trust funds to the Metropolitan Housing Commission. In 2013, there was a master development agreement between the city of Tucson and Gadsden. This is the Mercado. Gadsden has been the creator of the Mercado development. And so there was actually, and I'll mention it in the next slide, a component of that MDA that supported the Housing Trust Fund. And so, as you all know, in 2020, mayor and council created the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development and dissolved the Metropolitan Housing Commission. And so a little bit about what's in the Housing Trust Fund. So there is today, and this is a couple months old, and I know for sure there was one loan paid back. So my guess, and it was a very small loan. So my guess today, there's about $330,000 in the Housing Trust Fund. For the past few years, that money's accumulated very slowly, and it accumulates in one of two ways. One is, so the Gadsden Agreement called out a point of sale for contribution. It was a 1% point of sale. So when you see the $1 million homes being sold at the Mercado, 1% of that is coming into the city's Housing Trust Fund. And then in some cases, I showed those down payment assistance. Every now and then, a very small amount gets paid back from those down payment assistance, and that also goes to boost the Housing Trust Fund. So today, there's about $330,000 in there. And so this is something that's been on my radar in thinking about the trying to find sustainable ways to support affordable housing development and support housing services. And so in the housing affordability strategy, one of the policy items was about creating more sustainable funding. And one of the specific action items was to reinstate the Housing Trust Fund. Reminder, in 2022, when you all as a commission wrote recommendations to mayor and council, there was one of the items that was specifically called out was reinstating the City of Tucson Housing Trust Fund as a supplementary source of financing on projects to fill funding gaps. So based on your all direction, this is something that felt like a priority to move forward. And so at the time, in terms of what you all said, and one of the thinking here is how important gap funding is. I know I don't have to tell you all that, but there's many reasons why gap funding is really important for LIHTC projects, but also for non-LIHTC projects. We know that affordable housing is expensive. Building housing is expensive, and for affordable housing, you're not going to get the rents at the back end that really can help pay for that construction. So gap funding becomes that much more important. And so one of the many reasons to reinstate the Housing Trust Fund is should Proposition 414 pass for the gap financing pool. the gap financing pool the language was written specifically to ensure the funding goes through the Housing Trust Fund. And there was a few different reasons for that. One of them is that as these tend to be for LIHTC projects, these are given as loans. I wanted to make sure there was an option to pay back that loan after 10 years and make sure that it would go right back to affordable housing. So many of you are familiar with the HOME program. HOME program has very specific rules that as loans are paid back, that money becomes program income and it gets back reinvested into affordable housing. I wanted to make sure there was a mechanism to do that should 414 pass and we're giving affordable housing loans, that the loan payments would go to support more affordable housing. And so that was part of the goal with getting the Housing Trust Fund up and running. And so one of the things we asked, I also wasn't comfortable asking Mayor and Council to reactivate the Housing Trust Fund without there being an oversight body. And so really trying to not create and reinvent the wheel, since you all exist and meet regularly. And it is implied that as the Metropolitan Housing Commission was dissolved, that the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development took over all duties of the Metropolitan Housing Commission, but that wasn't, the Housing Trust Fund wasn't explicitly stated. And so wanted to cross our T's, dot our I's, and have it really clear that the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development is the oversight board. For right now, it's only $330,000, but it's something. And I'm a big believer in every single taxpayer dollar being really being public funds having an oversight body. And so things that in terms of what does that mean to be the oversight board, to me, it means making sure that the priorities and restrictions for existing the funds are clear. And they can be since 2008, we know a lot has changed, and especially since 2006 when it was created. So I think it's time to sort of relook at that. Regular monitoring and evaluation on how funds are used. And then should 414 pass, it is written into the documentation that the commission will provide a recommendation on the projects, just like you do for home funding now. And so moving forward, I did want to leave when I went to Mayor and Council, just sort of thoughts to think about existing. So there is a little bit of money in there now. And so that's something that we want to talk about. And there's the potential, if 414 passes, that there will be a revenue source. That revenue source, though, will be very specific for gap funding and only gap funding. But then I also am always somebody who's going to plant seeds that says that really long term, I think that thinking about a recurring dedicated revenue stream is something that, in my opinion, could really support the Housing Trust Fund. And so other cities do that through a variety of sources. In some cases, in Arizona, we can't put additional fees on our Airbnbs and our short-term rentals, but that is a way that some other states and cities are supporting their housing activities. Some cities are using general obligation bonds. Some cities have what's called a mansion tax. So if a property is over $1 million, a portion of that, similar to the Gadsden, can go to housing trust funds. And so wanted to just plant a seed that long-term, there is these point of sales and the repaying the mortgage loans are so small that this won't be a revenue source that can continue unless there is additional funding. So at that meeting, as I mentioned, even though it's not a ton of money, any dollar that exists today we know can be helpful. And so the mayor and council did ask for the commission to provide recommendations on how to spend the $330,000 that is in there today. Some of the discussion regarding that was that some mayor and council members specifically mentioned wanting to think about eviction prevention. And if we can use that funding to help prevent one family from being evicted, that would be, you know, anyone who is not evicted, that is a win. Others are concerned in terms of the money could go really fast and it, you know, and so I had mentioned you all are experts in the housing field and really feel like as the oversight body, I wasn't comfortable. I was really pleased with the idea that you all should kind of make that recommendation for them to consider. So happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions for you?
And I'm glad to see your hand, Marianne, because I do believe you were on that commission, right?
Yeah, but it was after they had the trust fund. So I was in the later generation of the commission. But my question is, do we need to spend this money now? Because it doesn't, I think we should wait to see what happens with 414. And then be able to, you know, put this toward, you know, a project that's gonna possibly produce more housing. So that's just my question is, do we have to do something with it now?
So I do not believe, my expectation is not that we'll walk away today with a recommendation, but I think I wanted to make sure that you all were aware this conversation happened. And I would say putting it on your high priority list to develop a recommendation soon. And I think part of that is if this money can help families from being evicted sooner than later, the better. But in terms of expectation, no, I think I do want sort of, as you all, I want you all to kind of let me know what is a reasonable timeline and process to determine this. And I would ask that that happen quickly. Appreciate the mayor and council concerns about if this money could be used now.
Okay, I'm just wondering if we could, you know, take this to the retreat. Tisha, what do you think?
There is some time during the retreat for us to discuss this.
Okay.
I think probably what will be proposed, or I mean, I can propose it now, and something that we can talk about at the retreat, is that a subcommittee take on the responsibility of working through eligibility and process. But this is really good guide, Anne, the history, knowing what's been utilized in the past with these funds.
Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, thank you in advance for providing sound recommendations. And I'll turn it back over to you, Tisha, to facilitate.
Yeah, I think Mindy was next and then Alan.
Thank you. How much time, Tisha, how much time has been allocated to discuss this issue at the retreat?
At the retreat? I don't know that Allison, do you recall whether we have a specific amount yet? I don't think so. We just have it down as one of the areas of discussion, but it's not the purpose of the retreat, but we can devote some time to it. So it might be, if everyone agrees, it might be just assigning it to a subcommittee with some things that commissioners might want that subcommittee to consider. And then they can bring it back to the full commission.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. Alan?
Okay, thanks. So I have lots of questions because eviction defense is what I do. And so I just heard the words eviction prevention. So my original question is, what does eviction prevention mean? And I'm assuming it has maybe some rental assistance component to it. If not, that's what it is. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that could be, and I see Ray jumping on. So some other funding sources have been used to pay for arrears or back utility costs, especially in cases where it was a one-time situation that got somebody behind, but that they could continue to afford where they're living moving forward. But in the past, yes, there's been flexible funding at various times to help ensure people stay housed.
And then how is it administered?
we will have to figure that out.
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I'm aware of lots of different agencies that do this kind of thing, and
Yeah.
there are definitely forms and processes and time, and it takes forever to get a check issued, and eventually you get a check, and then it's okay if it all works, and it's a
Yeah.
process, and I just, you know, the $300,000 could be used up just in administrating the money, which we wouldn't want.
And we'll take that up at the mini retreat, and I think that's the purpose of assigning it to a subcommittee to vet this out. And there are a few of us on here that do eviction prevention through flex funding or through rent utility assistance. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Ray?
Yeah, I'm just so grateful for this conversation, including bringing in the potential benefit for renters. I think sometimes we saw like a lot of the funds went to people who were able to purchase homes. And I think if we're really, before starting to make decisions, thinking about that equity lens of who benefits the most and ensuring that people who have the lowest income and assets are able to really benefit a lot from this. So very grateful for this conversation and for your advocacy in reinstigating the Housing Trust Fund.
Thanks, Ray.
Great. And if there are no other questions, we do need to go back to one item, and that is the meeting minutes. Y'all were provided with the meeting minutes. They're also on the website. Did anyone have any discrepancy with it? If not, if we could get a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Mindy made a motion, seconded by Mary Ann. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays?
I feel compelled to abstain since I wasn't
Yes.
around.
Abstentions are next. Anyone besides Alan, who may have not been present the last meeting? Thank you, Alan. Okay, thank you. So with that, Anne, if we could go now to federal funding update.
Yeah, I feel like you all might have as much information as I do in terms of that. I don't have a whole lot of clarity or information that you probably don't already know. I would say, of course, we are looking at what we do know, which is no matter what happens in terms of the budget, we are worried about what our funding looks like in the future. And in particular, some of the funding sources that we've been talking about. We know the community planning and development area of HUD is likely going to be hit. And so home funding, community development block grant funding, emergency solutions grant funding, those are things we're keeping an eye on. To date, at least at the city end, and tell me if any of agencies that do contract directly with HUD have been impacted, but we have been able to draw on all of our grants. So, there is not that concern yet. Is that, Marcos, are you saying that is not the case?
I heard from Jay, who's in Washington this week, lobbying that one of their contracts that is directly with HUD was canceled midstream. I believe they're about 70% through I think it was like the multi-year grant. It was their education and outreach grant for fair housing. And that was canceled. So they are following up with the National Fair Housing Alliance, and hopefully we'll get that restored. And so Jay's in Washington, D.C., I believe, as we speak, unless he's already back. I don't know. I know he was planning to be there this week to meet with the National Fair Housing Alliance, as well as our Arizona congressional delegation out there.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, Marcos. Staff from HCD and city leadership are going to DC next week as in part of the NARO conference to do the same thing, meet with our congressional delegation and really try to advocate for the importance of a lot of the HUD funding, sort of all of the HUD funding that we receive in this region. I will say, in terms of staffing reductions, we have seen some minor impacts so far, but of course we know that we're likely to see more of that as As far as we're aware, the plan is still to reduce the HUD workforce by 50%. And so
Yeah.
we are anticipating we'll see that coming down the line as well.
Yeah,
But
and,
unfortunately, I don't have much clarity and sort of seems to be an onslaught of not great news.
Yeah, I was in DC last week with National Association of Counties and National Association for County Community Economic Development. We met with several congressional offices, and we held a briefing on the home program for some staffers in Congress. And so that I felt that was fairly well attended. I'm not sure what type of an impact it will have. But you know, that it is important to contact you know, our congressional members here and our senators to lobby on behalf of HUD and our programs, and not just the funding, but for the people too. And the message we were getting from staffers is that they you know, they were anticipating that cuts to programs like CDBG should be minimal. Home there seems to be not so much stability around home, so I think more lobbying is needed there. And but you know, we need to lobby against cuts to HUD and other federal agencies that could affect delivery of these funds. So yes, very important, but definitely very challenging times.
Mary Ann?
So this is not going to be very popular, but Marcos, it really helps if our Congress people are there voting. And we have one who hasn't voted for a very long time, and that's really hurt us. And so I think that's a conversation that we need to have with his office and in the Democratic Party in general. That's all I got.
I think the one other thing I can probably add, so we're a chartered member of NeighborWorks America, and a part of I sit on the board for the national network. March 14th is an important date. March 14th is when the continuing resolution expires. So I think by the end of next week, we should know whether or not there will be a continuing resolution, whether or not there will be a shutdown, and then what it looks like. I know there is some documented conversation about a 6-month extension, but there's some hesitation around that at current funding levels because of what might come following that. So that's all I can add in regards to that. Alan?
I have a question, which is, I don't know the answer to this, but is anybody on this meeting know about EELS funding? Is that going to continue, or what's the status of that?
I do. EELS is not federally funded. The EELS program that we're running through the shelter is not federally funded. But Andrew is the best person to talk to at the county about that.
Thank you, Alan. All right, if there's nothing else, we're going to move on to the next item, which is Pima County Housing Commission update. And is that Andrew? Who is that?
Don't see anyone from the county. Marcos.
Yes, Neto?
I was gonna say, Sophia Blue is in, but she's gone.
Yeah, I thought Sophia was, I saw her on earlier.
She's no longer on.
Yes, she left the meeting.
Oh, okay. Was there some material that I thought I saw that was included
In the,
Yes.
with the agenda?
PowerPoint?
Yeah,
Allison or Neto, you want to share that?
yeah, I can
Oh, Marcos, do you want to share that?
review. I don't have it up, unfortunately. Let me see if I can pull it up here.
Thank you.
Oop, I thought I did, but I lost it. Hold on. Let's see. Okay, and
I'll just, while Marcus is
are
pulling
you
up,
able to
I'll
see
just
that one now?
say,
Did I get it right?
oh,
Are you guys seeing this
Yes,
or?
yes, we are. There it is, Pima
Oh.
County Board of Housing.
Nice job, Marcos.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't have, so, this just summarizes what the Housing Commission has been working on. Of course, we've had the general fund allocations, 3, and, there are negotiations ongoing with the, next fiscal year's budget, and it looks like, our Board of Supervisors are gonna be supporting, another $5 million for gap funding from the county budget for next fiscal year. There was a housing needs assessment. I believe that was reviewed already by Sophia at a previous meeting. If not, we can get those details up for the next one. I don't see it here with this. But the housing needs assessment, as it says on this center point right in here, was part of the comprehensive regional housing market study that is ongoing with Eco Northwest, and then the housing work group exploring the sustainable strategies moving forward. So we did have a presentation for our housing commission meeting in February. And we were suggesting utilizing some of the next fiscal year's gap funding to help fund other activities such as emergency rental assistance and emergency eviction legal services. So that's why these are in here. We did get a mixed reaction from our housing commissioners who still would like to see a good portion allocated towards gap funding for new affordable housing development and or preservation. But we did provide some options to fund these other 3 activities, which would be the Community Action Agency, which provides the emergency rental and utility assistance. They can also help with delinquent mortgage payments. The emergency eviction legal services, which was discussed previously, we're also looking to tap into some of the gap funding to help continue the EELS program, and which was, initially funded through the Treasury ARP funding, the local fiscal recovery funds that came through the American Rescue Plan. While they were federal, they do not have a lot of the other restrictions that come with our other community development funding that comes through HUD. So it would be very helpful if we are able to use some of our general funds to fund these other activities. But again, we'll be working with the working group. Will be taking this up, and we do have members of our commission on the working group that is exploring the funding strategies. And much the same fashion that Ann mentioned, the city is looking at these other potential funding sources to, keep funding our gap fund and county housing trust fund at some point. So that's all I have for now. Happy to answer any questions.
Marcos, on the EELS, I know that it's expanded to be working with people who lost their housing due to the evictions who are at the shelter, and that
Yes.
the state of Arizona funded that rapid rehousing program, which is what I meant about it not being federal.
Right, we did, you were correct there. There's also some funding from the state that is helping to continue the program. And, I'm not sure, I think the local fiscal recovery funds through the American Rescue Plan, we're probably on the tail end of that funding and are pursuing other funding sources like the state of Arizona. And yeah, I'm sure the program would be happy to get a contribution from the city's housing trust fund, should that be the recommendation from this board. So just shameless plug. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Do the commissioners have any questions for Marco? Okay, if not, thank you. And the next agenda item is the Mobile Housing Working Group update. Ray?
Yeah, we had really strong interest in starting a mobile home park manufactured housing task force. We met with the city commission, and I forgot their full name. They're corollary to our Commission on Equitable Housing and Development, the Affordable Housing Group there. And they recommended that we call it a task force rather than a subcommittee to be able to work both cross the two commissions and also to invite other members of the public. We have 36 people register. That includes people from Pima County Public Health, from Sherpa, from home repair, from a number of mobile home and manufactured housing residents, people from the University of Arizona. So I have a really strong group that's interested. The first meeting is going to be the fourth Thursday from 1 to 3. The first meeting, I believe, is April 24th. And it's open to others, and they'll be open to the public, and we'll be announcing it as well. But if people are interested in being on the email list, there is a registration form so that we'll have everyone's contact information in one place, and we'll send it out to all of the commission as well. But if anyone would like to be more involved and would like to be part of the planning group too, we're going to meet 1 month prior to that date. I believe it's March 27th. Also from 1 to 3 to talk through facilitation and some planning priorities. And the meetings will be mostly on Zoom, but the first one will be in person at the location where we used to meet right across from HCD. Yeah, and everything will be in English and Spanish. Any questions about that?
Yeah. Any questions from the commissioners? No? Thank you, Ray.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Ray, good job getting it to this and being able to call it a task force and grab so many people. I think I just want to say thank you.
And there's a lot of interest in the issue, and a lot of people are feeling and seeing the way that people are being impacted in the home. So like the time is right to call it.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Mary Ann. With that, next agenda item is city update.
So I think we're on city update. I'll say, if you have anything you want to add, we're trying out more detailed materials in your detailed agenda so that we can be actually a little bit shorter in these meetings. So there's even more detailed information in your agenda materials, just some updates on our annual plan and the Amazon Flats groundbreaking that we had in the past month. So please check that out. We will have, we're ordering a number of printed copies of the, sorry, not annual plan, I did it, Ann, annual report. HCD's annual report is out, kind of detailing all the work we've been up to in 2024. And so we're gonna print some copies for the commission to commission members to have their hands on. Maybe we'll have them by the retreat. But there's a link in the chat. And is there any other updates you'd like to share?
No, I think you covered it. Thanks.
Okay, great, thank you. And we're at our final agenda item, which is just next steps. The mini retreat is set for March 28th, 1 to 5. That will be in person. It is a public meeting. It will be at the training center of the Primavera Foundation. And the best suggestion for that is make sure you go through the Food City parking lot. And it'll be at the very end on the left. Upcoming subcommittee meetings, Equitable Housing Strategies is Tuesday, April 15, 1 to 2:30. Affordable Housing is Wednesday, April 16, 4 to 6. Housing First is Tuesday, April 29, 4 to 5. It says 40, but it's probably 5:30. Query on that, we are now missing 2 individuals from our subcommittee, one with Wendy Asher leaving, the other with Mark Clark retiring. Alan, would you be interested in sitting in on the Housing First subcommittee in her place?
I would. Yeah, that's one I have interest in.
Thank you, Alan. Ann, did you want to say something? No.
No, you covered it.
Thank you. Are you anybody else interested in that subcommittee? We really need 4 individuals. Mindy, go ahead. You're on mute.
I'm curious why there is, or how it is that there is little interest in the Housing First subcommittee compared to the other ones. And I don't know if there can be an answer, and it is a curiosity for me on how this precious, excuse me, I'm biased, this precious component of the commission is not garnering the support from the commission that I think it needs. And I don't mean to shame or blame. I'm just curious. You don't have to answer. I'll put my hand down and mute myself.
Tisha, you're muted, but I would also I am also interested in the Housing First Committee.
Oh, great. Thank you. We will add you to the list. Yay. Thank you. Allison, did you have something? Your hand was up.
I just also wanted to note the agenda item last agenda item had PDSD updates on it too. So there are some detailed updates in the in your notes, but wanted to give Corinne a chance to chat if she had anything to add.
Thank you, Corinne.
Yeah, the update focused on 2 items that are going through public review. The first is the community corridors tool, which is a zoning tool that comes out of recommendations from the Commission on Equitable Housing and other stakeholders, and it's designed to facilitate more mixed-use development, housing, including affordable housing along our corridors. And that was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission last week after a public hearing. And we'll be going to Mayor and Council for a public hearing on March 18th. So that's in about a week and a half. And that is another opportunity for public comment that could be submitted either via written comment or through testimony at the hearing that is in person on March 18th at the Mayor and Council chambers. So that is one item. And then the other item we include an update on is Plan Tucson, which is going to Planning Commission for 2 public hearings on March 12th and March 19th.
Thank you. Any questions for Corinne?
Yeah, Corinne, do you recommend that we send letters to each of the council members if we're not able to attend on the 18th?
Yeah, you could send a letter. You could send that to the Mayor and Council. You can send it to their offices or via the city clerk.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, anyone else before we go on? Okay, so thank you so much for the volunteers. We've had 2 new commissioner members now for the Housing First Subcommittee on Tuesday, April 29, 4 to 5:30. The next commission meeting after the mini retreat will be April 3rd, 4 to 6 p.m. That will be virtual. And then the mobile housing working group, as stated by Ray, the next meeting will be Thursday, April 24, 1 to 3 p.m. at the Sentinel Building, 320 North Commerce Park Loop, in person, and interpretation will be provided, as Ray stated, in Spanish translation. Anything else, commissioners, before we adjourn? If not, we look forward to seeing you at the in-person retreat. There will be snacks and beverages. Any last-minute enticement for all of you. And we look forward to seeing you. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
For facilitating.
Thank you.
Welcome, Alan.
Thank you.